I have been vice chairman of the Hartwell Cultural Society for 11 years, and I can tell you that in all that time nothing of consequence has ever occurred at one of our evenings. This is not a complaint. I am a retired solicitor. 11 years without consequence suits me admirably. The open recital dinners are the Society's annual crowning achievement, as Victor Ashton is fond of saying, though the word achievement does a great deal of lifting in that sentence. 30-odd guests. A decent claret. 3 or 4 members performing pieces of modest ambition before the main course. Victor presiding from the end of the table like a magistrate at a county fair, which, incidentally, is precisely what he is, or was, before he retired to devote himself entirely to us. He enjoys these evenings more than anyone. He enjoys them most, I've sometimes thought, when something goes slightly wrong and he is called upon to manage it. It makes him feel essential. The evening in question was a Thursday in late November. The dining room at Hartwell Hall, the Society hires it twice a year, was the usual arrangement: long table, good silver, candles still short enough that the wax hadn't begun to pool, and the old Bosendorfer upright at the far end where the carpet met the parquet. The piano has lived in that room for as long as the Society has used it. I have never once heard anyone say anything about it except to complain that it needs tuning. Harriet Vane had agreed to sit in as the evening's adjudicator, which was something of a coup. She had recently finished a European tour and was, as Victor informed us several times during the aperitifs, one of the most celebrated concert pianists currently active in this country. She sat midway along the table in a dress the color of slate, working through her bread roll with the slightly removed attention of a person who has spent years eating at other people's tables and has learned to do it gracefully. She said very little. When she said something, the room leaned slightly toward her. She had that quality. She was not making an effort to have it. I sat 3 chairs from the piano. I always sit 3 chairs from the piano. Close enough to hear the thing. Far enough that no one will be tempted to invite me to play. Father Gerard arrived slightly late, as clergy always do, and he had brought a guest, a small, white-haired nun in a gray habit whom he introduced simply as Sister Agatha. "She's been helping us with the parish archive this autumn," he said, a little apologetically, as though she required a justification to be present in public. She smiled at the room once, a brief and entirely sufficient smile, and settled into a chair near the foot of the table with the particular stillness that some elderly women have. The stillness of a person who has lived a long time in small rooms and has learned not to need more space than they occupy. I registered her. Then I forgot her. I am not proud of this. But I am being accurate about it. We got through the soup and the first 2 performers without incident. Geoffrey Marsh played Elgar, adequately. Young Claire Rutherford played a Scarlatti sonata and played it rather well, and Harriet Vane told her so with a crispness that made everyone at the table sit up slightly, as though they had been reminded what the word well actually meant. Then, between courses, Victor received a message on his telephone. He read it. He frowned in the precise way of a man who finds a problem he is looking forward to solving. The 3rd performer had cancelled. Stomach thing. Family matter. The table offered a polite murmur of sympathy that lasted 4 seconds. Then silence, and everyone looking at Victor, who was already looking at the room, measuring it, moving along the table from face to face, with the expression of a man assembling his solution. His gaze landed at the foot of the table. On Sister Agatha. I thought, oh, Victor. Don't. Come now, sister, he said. His voice had that quality it sometimes gets, amused, carrying, pitched for the room rather than for her. The voice of a man who believes everyone present will enjoy what he is about to do. Surely the convent teaches a little something. Give us a tune. He gestured toward the piano with an open hand, an invitation that was not quite one. Something simple. A hymn, if you like. The instrument won't bite. There was laughter. I want to be clear about what kind of laughter it was, because it matters. It was not cruel. There was not a person in that room trying to wound her. It was the easy, comfortable laughter of 30 people who have collectively decided, without quite deciding, that a small white-haired nun in a gray habit at a cultural society dinner is a safe and gentle object of amusement. The laughter that means, of course she can't, and isn't that charming, and Victor is very good at these moments. Father Gerard smiled in the careful way of a man who has weighed his options and concluded that intervening will cost more than not intervening. I said nothing. I should say that plainly. I said nothing. I looked at Harriet Vane. She was looking at her water glass. Sister Agatha looked at Victor. She had pale blue eyes. I noticed them now for the first time, and noticed that they took a long time to give you anything, the way deep water takes a long time to show you the bottom. If you'd like, she said. She stood. She was smaller standing than sitting, which is unusual. She moved to the piano without hurrying, and without acknowledging the room, not dismissively, simply with the focus of a person who has somewhere to be and knows precisely how to get there. She pulled out the bench. She considered it for a moment. Then she reached for the height knob on the left side and made one adjustment, a single, unhurried half-turn, with the offhand certainty of someone who has done this in 100 different rooms, on 100 different instruments, and has learned that the bench is always set wrong for her and always correctable in under 2 seconds. Her eyes did not drop to her hands while she did it. In 11 years of these evenings, I had never seen a performer adjust the bench without looking at it. The room was settling. Not silent yet, there were still small sounds, the scrape of a chair, Geoffrey Marsh reaching for his wine, but settling, the way a room settles when something is coming and the air has begun to know it before the people do. Sister Agatha sat. She placed her hands in her lap. She looked at the keys for one moment, and then her hands moved. The 3 opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor are not a beginning. They are a verdict. They fall like something being declared, once, and then again, and then once more, and in the silence between each one the room is being reorganized, though no one in it understands yet that reorganization is what's happening. I didn't know the piece. I didn't know who had written it. I knew only that the first chord arrived somewhere behind my sternum, and the second arrived harder, and by the third I had stopped breathing and the room had too. The laughter was gone. I don't mean it had faded or dissolved. I mean it was simply no longer in the room, the way a smell is no longer in a room when a window opens. Where 30 seconds ago there had been the comfortable warmth of people who believed themselves in a harmless situation, there was now silence of a different order, the silence of people who have understood, all at once, that they are somewhere they did not expect to be. She played with her eyes half closed. The music moved through its first section, grave, tolling, the 3 chords returning and receding, and then it gathered, and the central section rose out of it like something that had been waiting at depth. Her hands across the keyboard were not what I expected from hands that small, from arms that slight. The sound she drew from the old Bosendorfer was not what I expected from an instrument that old and that seldom played. The wall of sound climbed and climbed, hammered, layered, relentless, and it became the kind of thing you stop hearing through your ears and begin to feel through somewhere less specific. Geoffrey Marsh had both hands flat on the table. Claire Rutherford's mouth was open. Victor Ashton, who had asked for a hymn, something simple, a small accommodation before the main course, had gone the color of old paper. Father Gerard was crying. He was doing it quietly, in the way you do when the tears are ahead of your awareness of them, and I didn't look at him for more than a moment. It seemed like an intrusion. I looked at my own hands, which were pressed together in my lap, and I noticed they were pressed together in the manner of someone who has formed a private resolution about something, though I couldn't have told you what it was. The music came back to its opening, the 3 chords returning, quieter now, no longer a verdict but a question, or perhaps something that had moved past both and become simply a statement of fact, and then it resolved, bar by bar, into the final fading passages, and her hands slowed with it, and the last note was struck and then held and then released, and the silence that followed was not the silence before she had played. It was entirely different. She lifted her hands from the keys. She placed them in her lap. She looked at no one. Harriet Vane stood. She did not applaud. She did not speak. She rose from her chair at the middle of the long table, and she bowed, a single deliberate bow, the kind you make to something that has earned it and that you want to be certain knows you mean it, and she held it for a moment before she straightened. The room followed. Not in unison. In a wave, the way it goes, one person rising and then the person next to them and then the rest of us, upright without entirely deciding to be, and the applause was the kind that surprises the people doing it, as though the hands have arrived at a conclusion that the rest of the body is still catching up to. Victor Ashton was last to stand. He stood. He clapped. His mouth opened and then closed and then, finding nothing on offer, stayed closed. He looked, for the first and only time in 11 years of my knowing him, like a man who has run out of things to say and is not sure he'll be getting them back. Sister Agatha sat at the piano for a moment that seemed to have its own duration. Then she stood, smoothed her habit once, and walked back to her chair at the foot of the table. She sat. She picked up her water glass. She drank from it with the composure of a person who has done an ordinary thing. I wanted to speak to her. I didn't speak. The words available to me, wonderful, extraordinary, remarkable, thank you, were the wrong currency entirely, and I have spent enough years in law to know when silence is the more honest response. It was in the car park afterward, while Father Gerard stood by his car looking for his keys, that I learned what I should have had no way of knowing and no right to ask about. She was at the Royal Northern, he said. Not looking at me, looking at his key ring, turning it over in his hands. The tone of a man sharing something that belongs to someone else. Conservatoire trained. All the way through. She was performing publicly by her mid-20s, solo recitals, some ensemble work, a career that was beginning properly. Her younger sister died. He was quiet for a moment. It was a particular sort of grief. The kind that turns a person entirely around. She entered the convent at 34. He found the right key. He held it without using it. She hasn't played publicly since. Not once. Not in 43 years. He got into the car and drove away, and I stood under the yellow car park light with the cold coming in off the fields, and I thought about 43 years. I am 73 years old. 43 years ago I was a junior in a practice in Wigan, filing pleadings, and making tea and trying to learn what I was doing. I can account for nearly every year since with some document, some record, some evidence that the time had passed and been spent on something. I thought about carrying a gift like that in silence for 43 years. What it weighs. What it does to a person from the inside, or what it doesn't do, what it preserves, sealed away somewhere interior, intact, kept. Victor asked for something simple. She had been 34 years old when she made a promise to a grief that asked everything of her, and she had kept it, and she had walked into the dining room on a Thursday in November, and a man who enjoys feeling essential had made a small joke at her expense, and she had sat at the piano and played the Rachmaninoff prelude in C-sharp minor as though she had been waiting, without drama and without self-pity, for someone to think to ask. Harriet Vane, who had performed in Vienna that autumn, stood and bowed. I have been vice-chairman of the Hartwell Cultural Society for 11 years, and nothing of consequence has ever occurred at one of our evenings. Except once. I was 3 chairs from the piano. I was not breathing. I will carry it as long as I carry anything.